It's been transformational, in a word. What we've seen happen in the Saudi real estate market. I mean, a key part of His Highness's vision for the kingdom is to provide and deliver world-class housing. Saudi Arabia, of course, has a population of about 35 million people. About 56% of that population is aged below the age of 35. So it's got a very large, young millennial population. And the kingdom's vision for Saudi citizens is to achieve a home ownership rate of about 70% by the end of this decade. We're currently sitting at circa 62%, which is ahead of target, which is tremendous.
This is the 966.
We are speaking now with Faisal Durrani, partner and head of Middle East research at Knight Frank, the London-based global real estate consultancy, which just released 2 reports on Saudi Arabia's real estate market, both commercial and residential, which we're really excited to talk about, among other things. Thank you so much, Faisal, for joining us today on the 966.
Thank you, Lucian. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are delighted, Faisal. As we've talked about, we rely on Knight Frank surveys and reports for our daily newsletter. I mean, it's a go-to resource in terms of real estate, and we feel especially fortunate because the residential and commercial market surveys for summer 2022 were just released. In preparing for the conversation today, I learned a lot about Knight Frank. I didn't realize that Knight Frank was founded in 1896 and has an extraordinary pedigree. I mean, you have a global network, but you've been engaged, Knight Frank, over the years, and I had a chuckle when I saw that in 1915 you guys helped buy Stonehenge, but that's only one in a line of amazing sort of deals and consulting services you provided. Can you talk a little bit about both your global footprint as well as in the region and in Saudi Arabia?
Sure. Well, yes, Richard, you're right. Knight Frank has been around for quite some time. We're over 125 years old. We're headquartered in London, but we have businesses in virtually every country you can think of. We've got about 16,000 people working for us in approximately 400 offices. And we have been involved in providing real estate advice on all of the world's most famous assets, ranging from Stonehenge to the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. Within the Middle East, we operate pretty much across the entire region. We've got offices in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and Jeddah. And we also have an extensive network across most of Africa. In terms of our services, we are a predominantly real estate advisory business. We are the world's largest privately owned real estate practice. We offer a range of consulting services that cover things from data center consultancy across to healthcare and education. We have a brokerage arm that deals with residential and commercial real estate, be it offices, industrial, retail, or hospitality. And we also offer a wide range of strategic consultancy services. On the transactional side, we've obviously got an investment team that covers the entire region. We have a big focus on the industrial and logistics sector. And we also have a private office team that deals exclusively with private family offices and high net worth individuals.
And you have, what kind of operation do you have in Saudi Arabia? I guess in October last year, you opened up a sort of retail team to advise Saudi-based clients. But do you have a position there now, or how long have you been sort of deeply into Saudi Arabia?
Sure. So we actually have 2 offices in Saudi Arabia. We've got an office in Riyadh as well as another office in Jeddah. And again, we offer the whole suite of real estate advisory services that we do globally. So we do have a valuations team down there. We've got a strategic consulting team. that provides all sorts of clients advice on what to build, when to build it, what to price it at. So clients include a range of banks, developers, government institutions, investors, down to individual buyers and investors and high net worth individuals as well.
Yeah, at the end, I want to ask you a little bit about the high net worth individuals, a survey you did regarding NEOM and the Giga projects, which I think will be interesting, but that's on the back end. Can you give us, you and again, because you have do so many surveys and you're so deeply involved in the market, can you sort of give us a big picture overview of what you've seen happen in the real estate market since the launch of Vision 2030 and National Transformation Plan in 2016? So this is what, 6 years ago now.
So it's been transformational, in a word. What we've seen happen in the Saudi real estate market, I mean, a key part of His Highness's vision for the kingdom is to provide and deliver world-class housing. Saudi Arabia, of course, has a population of about 35 million people. About 56% of that population is aged below the age of 35. So it's got a very large, young millennial population. And the kingdom's vision for Saudi citizens is to achieve a home ownership rate of about 70% by the end of this decade. We're currently sitting at circa 62%, which is ahead of target. Which is tremendous. And as a business, we've actually been tracking the volume of real estate and infrastructure projects that have been announced since the National Transformation Plan was unveiled in 2016. And to date, we're tracking over $1 trillion worth of real estate and infrastructure projects around the country. And that includes over 1.3 million residential units to be completed by the end of the decade, more than 30 million square feet of office space, and over 300,000 hotel rooms. So the country, in essence, is going through a reinvention or a rebirth, if you like. We are seeing the emergence of what could arguably be one of the world's hottest new real estate markets.
It is extraordinary, the numbers. You pay attention to the results and the metrics, but you also have to look at the underlying regulatory framework. And over that period, it seems like Saudi Arabia has paid close attention to trying to make, obviously, mortgages more available, but also, making commercial access in terms of offices and headquarters and this sort of thing more easily accomplished. Have you seen that change in the regulatory environment that's promising?
I mean, absolutely. The government has worked really hard to make it easy for young Saudis to get onto the property ladder through various initiatives such as WAFI and Sakani to provide access to more affordable homes. And on the commercial side of things, predominantly the office market in Saudi has historically been driven by government entities or the public sector. But we are starting to see that change. A lot of businesses around the world are now, clamoring to be part of the economic transformation that's taking place. I mean, if we look at the end of last year during Q4, more than 2,000 foreign business investment licenses were issued. And these are companies that want to establish themselves in the kingdom to carry out work. And, to put that into context, that figure of 2,000 is 360% up year on year. And it is the highest quarterly level of new business licenses that were issued in the kingdom. And the vast majority of demand for office space in Saudi right now sits in Riyadh. Riyadh itself is being positioned as a new commercial hub for the kingdom. The population of Riyadh today sits at about 8 or 9 million people, and the goal is to pretty much double that by 2030. And in order to accommodate that tremendous growth that's expected, as you can imagine, a huge amount of construction activity is planned to house new residents and also new businesses. The government has various initiatives such as Program HQ, which is an initiative to get businesses that are headquartered elsewhere in the region to hub out of Riyadh, specifically out of King Abdullah Financial District, which is Saudi Arabia's equivalent of Dubai's financial center. And we are seeing a lot of demand for office space inside KAFD or CAFT as a result of these initiatives.
Yeah, we're eager to the Royal Commission on Riyadh City has said they're going to come out with their grand strategy, this year, and we're eager to see that. All this construction, commercial, hospitality. It may not something that Knight Frank may not cover, but even if you know about it anecdotally, who are the primary benefactors? In other words, are most of the contractors, are they Saudi? Are they non-Saudi? Who's building these units?
So that's a very good question. So predominantly the development is being led by government-related entities. But this in itself, as you can imagine, with those sorts of numbers, there are bound to be challenges in delivering the volume of real estate that is being planned. But rather than being a challenge, we see that as an opportunity for the government. The government may explore different routes to delivering the quantum of stock that's being talked about. There's different methods such as a master developer delivery model, where individual plots of land can be sold off to individual developers, or individual developers can be allocated plots within certain parameters to develop it out themselves. And we've already seen moves to that effect. The government announced a series of developers that would be classed as champions for the country. And in essence, what that means is the government entity responsible for the various giga projects being planned can take more of a strategic view of what is going on, rather than getting stuck into the nuts and bolts of actually delivering projects. It'd be remiss not to use a regional example of where that has been done successfully. Somewhere like Dubai, a district called Dubai Marina, which has 300 or 400 skyscrapers, was master planned by a developer called Emaar. They built out 6 skyscrapers originally. The rest of the plots were sold off to individuals, individual developers, individual investors, and they were all then encouraged to build their own buildings within certain parameters. And that has worked out extremely well. And like I say, what that meant is Emaar could take more of a strategic view, making sure the community facilities are in place, the infrastructure works, rather than worrying about building every one of those single plots out.
This is interesting, and Emaar also has projects in Saudi. A government-related entity would be something like Roshan.
Precisely. So it would be Roshan, it would be Qiddiya, it would be the Red Sea project, it would be Amala, it'd be Neom, it'd be Al Ula, etc. Yes.
On the balance that they're trying to strike, and I'm talking about the private sector contractors, and as you say, identifying champions. It'd be ideal if you are tagged as a champion. But for private sector contractors, competent private sector contractors in general, is there a feeling that they're getting a share, or they will get a share, or their share is coming?
That's a tough question to answer, Richard. I think the opportunity lies in being able to demonstrate yourself. As long as you've got a proven track record, you've delivered quality product, you can be part of it. I mean, at the end of the day, as I say, one of the biggest challenges is delivering this volume of real estate. And it is going to be a case of all hands to the pump, because we are going to need pretty much everyone we can get who's competent to take part in transforming the country.
Let's turn then to the summer 2022 surveys, which I just think it's interesting. It's striking, because when you read these Knight Frank surveys, it's remarkable how real estate metrics help gauge progress across a whole range of Vision 2030 priority goals. And you wouldn't think it, but it's clear. I mean, for example, the residential survey, you get insight into the drive to make mortgages more accessible and housing more affordable. And in your commercial survey, you get insight on the pace of foreign investments and licenses, on the rapid growth of digitization and e-commerce, and the growth of tourism construction, among other things. I mean, it's really informative, and it gives you a real measure on how progress is going in terms of Vision 2030 goals.
So yeah, in terms of the residential market, I mean, there's been, I said this before, there's been a phenomenal transformation in the residential landscape in Saudi Arabia. One of the most striking things that's taking place at the moment is all the demand that is being talked about in terms of new demand for residential property, that is all being created from within the kingdom itself. And how that's happening is we're actually starting to see household sizes declining. So we are seeing taboos around less multi-generational living starting to fade away. So you've not got, necessarily as many aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers living together in the same home. You've got the younger generation of Saudis who are keen to have their own home and raise their own families. Also, historically speaking, Saudis have had a preference to live in villas and raise their families in villas. And, that hasn't gone away, but it's no longer culturally unacceptable to live in an apartment on your own or raise a family in an apartment. And also, by their very nature, apartments tend to be more affordable than villas. And so within the residential space itself, we're seeing structural changes in the demand dynamic, whereas I say, the demand is being created locally amongst the Saudi population itself, which plays well into the very crux of Vision 2030, which is to transform the lives of Saudi citizens by providing them with world-class housing that you would get anywhere else on the globe.
It was interesting in your report, it noted that 40% of first-time buyers are looking for a villa for their first home purchase. And that's a significant percentage. I also think it's striking too, because one of the first thoughts, and you saw His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, spoke earlier this week about the design for the line. And that would all be villa apartment living. If it were to come to fruition.
You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we ran a survey of 1,000 Saudi households recently to gauge people's appetite to live and invest inside the kingdom. And one of the first questions we asked people who were tenants or homeowners, we said, what type of, what is it that drives you to live in a villa or an apartment? And when it came to villas, the number one reason was privacy. But when it came to apartments, the number one driver to buy or rent an apartment was cost. And we wanted to do a little bit more of a drill down into what tenants plan to do in terms of their first home purchase. So these are people who would be first-time buyers. So when we asked them perceptions on what type of property they would like to buy, apartments came out head and shoulders over villas. And what was really interesting is when we asked them about their budgets, about 50% of them said that they would like to spend between 750,000 and 2.2 million riyals on their first home. And that figure is important because, as you've just pointed out, when we asked them about their property size preferences, about 40% said they would like to live in a large apartment, a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment, and about a third said they would like to live in a villa. And it's great. Those aspirations tell us exactly what type of properties to be building or supplying the market, or you would have thought. But today, if you are trying to purchase a good quality villa in Riyadh, it would cost you in excess of 2.3 or 2.4 million riyals. If you're looking to purchase a good quality 2-bedroom apartment, it would cost you certainly a lot more than 750,000 riyals. So what our survey started to tell us is that we are seeing an emerging discrepancy between first-time buyer expectations and the type of product available in the market. And we feel that the Ministry of Housing, to an extent, has played a very important role in helping to provide homes that are more affordable, capped at 1 million riyals. But generally, what we tend to see is a lack of town housing developments inside the kingdom. But by their very nature, they are similar to villas, albeit they are stacked. But they come with the outside space, which is what a lot of people crave, especially in a post-COVID world. They tend to be more affordable. And in our experience, we have found that town housing developments are extremely successful and rapidly absorbed into the market. So we feel that there is a huge untapped opportunity in the townhome development space across the kingdom. Interesting.
Can you talk? I know there's a great deal of focus on Riyadh right now on building out. They put in a bid for Expo 2030, and I think they're sort of eventually working around that. Preparing for that opportunity possibly. Can you talk a little bit about the different markets and the nature of them? Jeddah, Riyadh, Dammam area.
Sure. One of the most interesting things, as you pointed out, is this focus on Riyadh. This is where the vast majority of new jobs are being created, albeit more recently we have seen that being addressed with more government entities establishing projects in other cities around the kingdom, namely Jeddah, which is creating jobs. But the high concentration of new jobs in Riyadh has resulted in an influx of Saudi nationals themselves who are migrating within the kingdom, but it is also attracting overseas talent, overseas workers, and that is putting pressure on the housing market in Riyadh. And as a result, we've seen house prices in Riyadh in the last 12 months rise by 18 to 20%.
Wow.
But if you look at Saudi's second city, Jeddah, house prices there, have crept up by 3 or 4% at most. And that's a reflection of the fact that demand has weakened because a lot of younger Saudis, in particular, have migrated to cities like Riyadh. What's also interesting is, we're seeing a tremendous amount of residential development. We're seeing a tremendous amount of demand that's being created locally. We're seeing house prices rising in tandem. And we've seen the government respond by providing affordable mortgage options. We've done some analysis to look at affordability ratios. So we've looked at annual household incomes and we've benchmarked that against average house prices. Now, in a city like Riyadh, if you're looking to purchase a villa, it comes in at circa 6 to 8 times your annual household income. If you're looking to purchase a villa in a city like Jeddah, it comes in at 12 or 13 times your annual household income. Now, typically, when you go out to secure a mortgage, the best a bank is usually able to offer you is 4 or 5 times your annual household income. So we're clearly above those levels, particularly in a city like Jeddah, which is geographically land constrained, which is why the villa prices are higher there. But we're still nowhere near levels we see in other cities around the world. If we're looking at London, for example, you're talking a ratio of 30, 40 times your annual household income in order to be able to afford to buy. So it might be unfair to compare Saudi cities to London. So clearly we're not at those sorts of levels. But around the world, a typical level that is considered affordable is usually up to 6 times your annual household income. So we are above what is considered to be affordable. So the dynamic in the market is quite fascinating at the moment because you've got house prices that are rising. You've got this tremendous amount of demand that's being created locally. You've got the government and government entities trying to respond by providing, adequate an adequate number of new housing units to satisfy this demand. But at the same time, on the sidelines, we are seeing prices rising beyond affordability thresholds. And actually, if we look at what's been happening more recently, we've seen the number of homes being sold starting to slip. However, and this is what's fascinating, the total value of all homes being sold is actually rising, which is reflective of the fact that house prices are rising so much faster than people's incomes.
So let's turn to the commercial summer 2022 survey. The commercial, by the way, and I recommend it because it's laid out in a really easily accessed fashion. You have it organized by 3 sectors: office market, retail market, hospitality market, and then by 3 regions: Riyadh, Jeddah, and the Dammam area. So it's a really easy read. Can you give us an overview of key trends there?
Yeah, sure. I mentioned earlier about the high volume of new business licenses that have been issued across the kingdom, and that is resulting in really high levels of demand for commercial office space, if we want to start with that. And as we've said a few times now, the apparent focus of much of Vision 2030 is in and around Riyadh, barring all the giga projects on the western seaboard. And so we are in a situation where prime grade A office rents are under upward pressure. Over the last 12 months or so, we've seen grade A office rents in Riyadh rise by about 6 or 7%. In Jeddah, they're up by about 2 or 3%, and a similar amount in Dammam. The sort of challenge, I guess, for new businesses entering the market, and this isn't just unique to Saudi or unique to the Middle East, it's a global phenomenon. We are seeing businesses gravitating towards best-in-class grade A office space. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of the big drivers for it is to do with the global war for talent. In order to attract the best people to work for you, you need to show them that you are going to be working in a modern, well-considered office space that you are proud to turn up to every morning, if indeed you come to the office on a daily basis. The other big consideration is around environmental, social, and governance issues, which perhaps domestic businesses may not have high up their priority list, but international blue chip businesses certainly do, because they've got global mandates in place to occupy office space that is sustainable and checks various green boxes. And that type of office space in Saudi, in the region, is an extremely short supply. And when you've got international businesses that are vying for space, they want to be part of Vision 2030, they're entering a market where there is a shortage of such office space, which again is putting upward pressure on rents.
And so it's 96% occupancy rate, right, for grade A office space in Riyadh. How does that compare?
Correct, yeah.
How does that compare with outside of Saudi Arabia, with Dubai and some other cities in the region?
I don't know if this is going to surprise you or not, Lucian, but in Dubai, for grade A offices, occupancy levels are sitting in the mid to late 90% as well, and it's a similar number in Abu Dhabi. So the minute we start to see any increase in demand, it is going to place tremendous upward pressure on office rents. And actually, we are seeing office rents rising in other cities around the region as well. And what that means is it's driving a much greater disparity in the performance of grade A and grade B office rents. So we've got a real divergence in performance. It sort of raises questions around the future of grade B office space. The volume and quantum of it. What do you do with it? Do you go down the route of a change of use? Do you demolish and rebuild? But of course, if we're thinking about the sustainability agenda, if you demolish an office building, or any building for that matter, and rebuild it, you've got a much higher carbon footprint than if you refurbish it. And of course, going forward, if you're looking to secure green financing for your development, the banks are going to pay very close attention to that. So refurbing is probably one of the biggest investment opportunities, not just in the region, but globally. And ironically, a lot of older or Grade B office buildings tend to be very well located. They're in completed areas with complete infrastructure. There's public transport nearby, and there's amenities nearby because they're in developed areas. So rather than demolishing these buildings, as I say, that one of the biggest opportunities is to refurbish these, and I think we're on the cusp of seeing more of that sort of activity in Saudi and across the region.
Fascinating. Very interesting. And the retail market, same issues?
Retail has been quite interesting. I mean, again, this is a sort of global phenomenon where COVID has driven what appears to be a permanent shift in consumer behavior. With all the various lockdowns, people have turned to online shopping, and Saudi Arabia has been, no different at all. We've seen, the best shopping malls across the country, performing well in terms of their rents. They've been holding steady or creeping up very marginally. But like is the case around the world, in order to boost those dwell times and attract people to your shopping malls, you've got to move away from a model of just providing shops. It's about experiential retail. It's about edutainment. It's about finding ways to give shoppers a reason to spend time in your mall, whether it's through increased F&B offerings, through lifestyle options, through providing wellness facilities, educational facilities. It's much, much more than just shops. And those are the malls that have done the best throughout the course of the pandemic. But of course, the e-commerce sector has been, quietly booming in the background in Saudi, around the world. Pre-COVID, it was valued at about $8 billion. By the end of the decade, it's expected to be worth about $20 billion. So shoppers have definitely, turned to online shopping. And as I say, it looks like it's a trend that's definitely here to stay.
Your business is really fascinating at this juncture, isn't it? I mean, all over the world. COVID obviously being one cause of it, but it seems like evolution, as you say, ESG factors, financing, this sort of thing. It seems like a fascinating space to be in. That third, on the commercial side, the third sort of segment is the hospitality market. And this year, Knight Frank Summer 2022 survey noted that during 2021, Saudi Arabia jumped by 10 places to 33rd globally in the Travel and Tourism Development Index. Obviously, and we talk about it a lot in the 966 and also in our daily newsletter, the commitment to developing a tourism industry is vast. What are you seeing in the terms of the hospitality market?
I mean, the commitment by the government to transform the economy, stretches across basically every sector, and tourism is going to play a key role in helping to wean the economy off oil. Saudi Arabia is an extremely large country. It has very diverse terrain and climates, ranging from open deserts to forests with monsoons during the summer season. And I think, for a long time, a lot of those places have probably been inaccessible to global tourists due to perceptions, due to lack of air connectivity. But all of that is being changed. I mean, as part of Vision 2030, there's more than 40 new airports that are being planned around the kingdom. There's plans for a brand new national airline that's expected to be launched at some point this year based out of Riyadh. There's even talk of a brand new international airport in Riyadh that is going to cost more than $350 billion to build. Sorry, $150 billion to build. I beg your pardon. More recently, the government has extended an invitation to global airlines to start flying to Saudi cities, which is tremendous because the government is offering to subsidize the cost of any empty seats on these routes in a bid to open the kingdom up to tourists from around the world. And as I mentioned before, we've got something like 310,000 hotel rooms that are planned to be delivered before the end of the decade. And a lot of those hotel rooms are planned for the Red Sea coast, which is virgin territory. It has some of the best diving sites around the world. And right now, there isn't very much in the way of development along the Red Sea coast. We've got the Red Sea project, which is one of the kingdom's giga projects, which is probably the most advanced in terms of physical infrastructure in place. They're signing hotel agreements, and some of these resorts are going to be open quite soon. And what's interesting about the Red Sea project is when we spoke to investors about purchasing residential investment property around the kingdom, the Red Sea project was the second most popular amongst all of the giga projects. And the reasons cited for the Red Sea project being perceived to be such an attractive place to buy or invest is the predominant reason was having access to a luxury getaway, and also having access to the beach, just because it is such an untapped part of the kingdom. And right now, occupancy levels are around the kingdom range from about 40 or 50% in Riyadh, and fall away to 20 or 30% in Dammam. And the government has, through COVID, boosted the attractiveness of various Saudi cities through different festivals, and trying to, increase the amount of staycations taking place inside the kingdom. Of course, Saudi had, a very severe COVID travel restrictions in place, just like many other places in the world. And so tourists or Saudi travelers had very limited options in terms of where they could go. And so we saw an increased amount of internal tourism within the kingdom itself. But aside from that, a bigger driver is going to be the expected influx of visitors from overseas. Some of the giga projects that are being planned are pretty phenomenal. Projects like NEOM that you mentioned earlier. They're planning ski resorts, outdoor ski resorts, which would be the region's first in the mountains, called Trojena, which is, they're going to have ski chalets, and that's pretty incredible to be thinking about ski resorts in Saudi Arabia, which gives you an idea of the type of terrain and the varied climate that the kingdom offers.
You have, I know Knight Frank did a survey on high net worth individuals and their preferences, and you were just quoted this week in the Arab News, and I'll quote you back to you. So just in terms of the giga projects, but it's really interesting. You said the immense project that's talking about NEOM has captured the hearts and minds of Saudi investors who are patiently waiting to be part of history. Indeed, nearly 1 in 5 Saudis would like to live in NEOM, unquote. This is real insight, because if you're just a general citizen, a general person outside of Saudi Arabia, and you see the numbers on things like NEOM and the ambition and the design, the extraordinary design aspirations, you go, oh my goodness. I think it's viewed differently in Saudi Arabia. Is that correct?
It is. The survey that we did, the one that you're quoting, included 1,000 Saudi households as well as 55 high net worth individuals. So it was a combination of regular Saudi households plus Saudi high net worths. And we tried to gauge, how they feel about living and investing in the various giga projects around the kingdom. And the number one giga project that appeals the most at the moment is NEOM. Now, 41% of everybody we spoke to said that they would like to own a property in NEOM. And we also provided respondents with various phrases to select from to try and understand the primary driver for wanting to live or invest in one of the giga projects. And for NEOM, the number one reason cited was Vision 2030. Now, NEOM has done an incredible job at marketing itself. It's got some pretty phenomenal architectural plans that are soon to be realized. But NEOM has long been positioned as a bit of a crown jewel in Vision 2030. And Saudi nationals have bought into that vision. They want to be part of it. Everybody's excited about what they see that's planned for NEOM. Alongside Vision 2030, it's education that is key for people. There's been a lot of talk about the provision of world-class universities and schools, and people want the best for their kids. And in third place was sustainability. Of course, we all know that is a key part of NEOM. Projects like the Octagon, which also sit inside NEOM, which is going to be the world's largest floating city, and it's going to have a fully integrated and fully automated logistics hub, is going to be 100% run on renewable energy. And so those are the sorts of projects that have captured the hearts and minds of Saudi nationals. And as you said in that quote, according to our data, about 1 in 5 Saudis wants to move to NEOM to live there. And about 60% of them are looking for large homes. They want 3 or 4 bedroom family homes. So NEOM definitely is being seen as a place that Saudis want to live in. And overall, about 60% of everybody we spoke to said that they would pay a premium to live in NEOM. And that rose to about 82% amongst high net worth individuals, which just again underscores that depth of demand and the depth of willingness to be part of something extraordinary.
I thought it was interesting when Mohammed bin Salman, when he spoke earlier this week about NEOM, and something I hadn't in the line, when the line's design was announced, he was talking about a goal of 1.2 million by 2030 in terms of people living in NEOM, and ultimately 9 million by 2045. But he mentioned that the ultimate goal is to have, for him, 50 million people, half Saudis and half foreigners, living in the kingdom. So it is fascinating to think about in those terms of people, those numbers of living in one place. But the fact that a lot of Saudis are very interested in doing this, and in terms of the Crown Prince's vision, a lot of expats would be very interested in being there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it all comes down to job creation. And as part of Vision 2030, it is become the economic dynamo for the kingdom. We are seeing businesses rushing to establish themselves inside the kingdom, to be part of this transformation that is planned. In order to deliver this vision, a tremendous amount of investment is required, but so is a tremendous amount of knowledge and skills. And in order to do that, we are seeing huge numbers of new jobs being created. And yes, expats are flooding into the kingdom. But as we mentioned earlier, cities like Riyadh are also seeing a high level of internal migration of Saudi nationals.
Richard just laid it out perfectly about how great these reports are, how simple they make it to understand not just the residential and commercial real estate markets in the kingdom, but they sort of color almost every part of Vision 2030. And I'm curious about how the pandemic in general affected both residential and commercial real estate markets, because in the United States, there was a huge change on going back to the office. A lot of people moved outside of cities and are now slowly coming back, which is not really a phenomenon in Saudi Arabia. But I'm curious about how, with Saudi Arabia handling the pandemic so well, how things have changed or not since before the pandemic hit in Saudi Arabia with respect to going back to the office, or with respect to where Saudis and citizens live in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, really good question. I mean, look, undoubtedly, like everywhere else in the world, it has had a big impact on the way people think and behave when it comes to real estate. If we start with the residential sector, for example, when we carried out our survey, when we asked people why they like to live in a villa or an apartment, it was quite interesting to see how the pandemic has already begun to influence those sorts of preferences. For villas, as I said before, the number one reason for owning one or renting one is privacy. Number two, joint second reason was more indoor space and more outdoor space. So we already see that people, as a result of the pandemic, as a result of spending more time at home, are looking for extra space for a home office or a home gym or just some space in a garden for their kids to play. And that isn't going away. I mean, even when we looked at various amenities that people are looking for that would help push that transaction over the line, that would help convince them to make that transition from renting to owning or buying another property. We had a list of 10 different things that people named. And, I'm not going to list them all out for you, but there was a common thread that ran through those top 10 amenities that people are looking for. And it was interesting to see that a lot of those were actually linked to retail. So having access to a supermarket, being next to a shopping mall, having access to a coffee shop or a gym or a spa. And as we discussed earlier, retail is more than just the provision of shops. But now we've got aspirational buyers who are actually looking for these retail amenities to be within walking distance of their homes. So they've essentially laid out a blueprint for a successful residential community. Historically, we haven't really had any self-contained communities like those inside of Saudi Arabia. But now we've got Saudi citizens looking for that sort of self-contained development that you get in any city around the world. So COVID has definitely had a huge impact on the residential side. And when it comes to commercial property, just like everywhere else, businesses have gone through a right sizing process, which means that they have reduced their office footprints. They've tried to work hybrid working models, decide how often people are going to come in, how often they're going to work from home. And amongst international businesses, that's probably going to become a permanent feature, regardless of what country you're in. But when it comes to more domestic businesses, as you're seeing in the US, people are wanting to go into the office more often. They're wanting to be there 5 days a week, particularly new joiners or junior members of staff who benefit from that face-to-face engagement with more experienced professionals to learn from them. And that isn't going to go away either. But a sector that's probably worth keeping an eye on in all of this is the serviced office space, or the flexible office providers, because they're going to play a big role in helping companies redefine their post-COVID occupational strategies. You're always going to have businesses that are looking for large office spaces. They're looking for long lease lengths for the security of a tenure. But then again, you've got startup businesses and other businesses that want to be in what we call fully fitted plug-and-play space. They want to view it on a Friday and move in on a Monday. They want one bill that contains all of the utilities, and they want the flexibility of a lease that could be as short as a month or as long as 5 years. And so, as I say, the serviced office space is definitely one to keep an eye on as we come out of the pandemic.
Faisal Durrani, partner and head of Middle East research at Knight Frank. You can see these reports, by the way, for our listeners and viewers at knightfrank.com. You just have to register if you search for Saudi Arabia property, commercial and residential. They're there and they are fantastic. Faisal, thank you so much for your time. This was really enlightening and a terrific discussion.
A pleasure. Thank you, Richard and Lucian.